cloud. All right, so a reminder about the goal for this meeting. We want to review issues that are in the planning breakdown stage for threat management and eventually behavioral analytics once we have some more work defined around that area. And the goal will be to answer these three kind of high level questions on each of the items. So are the requirements clear? Do we know the boundaries of work that we need to accomplish? And is the research and solution validation complete? I think a main focus of this conversation should be around, and this isn't actually listed here, and I'm gonna go ahead and add it. Can we break this down into smaller logical components? You know, we've heard time and time again that if we can deliver smaller slices of technology to our customers and not define our issues in these sort of large epic type efforts that we've seen over the last couple of milestones, that both the engineers are going to be happier because you'll be moving through issues faster. Things will hopefully be a little bit more clear in what you're building, but we'll also be more reliable to our product managers for you know, estimates on what we think we can commit to in a given iteration. So if the issue is acceptable, then it'll move into the scheduling step and just pick up where we've always had the workflow process. You know, the EMs and PMs do capacity planning. They sign off issues for additional grooming. We don't expect this meeting to complete the grooming for each of these issues. There will be additional grooming. And if the answer is no, then it goes back to the PMs and they will help answer the questions that we had some concerns around, and we'll do this activity again. So since this is our first one, we shouldn't have much follow-up from the last meeting. For the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and we will take a look at the first item. So, system notes. So this is your opportunity to ask questions, speak up, identify if there's any areas where we feel like they could be kind of split off into their own standalone issue. The hope is that people are spending time reviewing these issues prior to this meeting. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time waiting for people to do that now and think of their issues. Unfortunately, if we don't get participation, the assumption at this point is that this one is good to go. So
maybe we're a little more forgiving on that the first time around. We're a little more flexible.
They want me to grill you guys. No, and that's a good point. So, I don't know if the message came out very clear to everybody that the hope is that you can commit, maybe an hour or so before this meeting to doing your homework and making sure that you've prepared questions, that you're not reading through this for the first time, basically. So is there anyone that this is familiar to that would like to raise any concerns or logical breakpoints or boundaries of work?
I do have a question. So system events. So we want to create a system event when a user changes the state of a vulnerability, like open to confirmed, confirmed to resolved, etc. I'm just reading, part 2. So I'm assuming there's already a way to log system events. There's already a way to search for system events. We're just using existing functionality, just adding a new thing to log. Would that be the case?
Kind of. There's no unified interface for checking all system events throughout GitLab. It's all contextual. So within the case of an issue description or an issue activity feed, you'd see the notes for that issue. So that is one component of this, is creating or showing these notes within the context of the vulnerability UI.
Okay, so it's not a separate thing of those system events. It's the events are would be a part of the vulnerability, the first class vulnerability. Feels like we could base this based on how we do this with similar things with issues. Issues can change state too. So we should be able to reuse at least that concept, maybe not the code, but the concept.
I don't know if it's obvious for everyone, but where exactly we're going to have these events?
They'll be in the vulnerability page at the bottom, below the bottom.
Standalone vulnerability page, when you look at each individual vulnerability, in addition to solutions and related issues, there'll also be the system notes, like you would see in a standard issue, right, Andy?
Yes.
We should
This
probably have that in the description then.
This might be incumbent on having general commenting functionality as well, now that I think about it.
Can you explain a little more, Andy?
So the way we built the functionality for the first iteration is when you change the status, you kind of get a fake system event where it gives you the system event line, like you would see here, like, you know, Michael Scott changed the vulnerability status to confirmed. Then below it, we give the user the opportunity to add a comment to actually each status. If they were to like confirm it, then they could, in this block area at the bottom of the vulnerability, they could type a comment as it pertains to that confirmation. Same with dismissal and same with resolving it. This kind of separates those things, the comment from the status that had been changed. So we may need to consider having general commenting.
Could that be a separate issue in itself, though, Andy? Wouldn't be
Oh
hard.
yeah, that'll be many separate, I'm sure. Yeah, that's a big undertaking, I think.
I think I'm thinking about this in a bit of a different way than that, where I don't think that this would involve. So two of the logical ways we break that down is like the front end work and the back end work, and the UX work. And the UX work looks good here for the system notes, but it's a bit. So system events occur when regular interactions occur, like changing the status from open to closed. So from the front end, we just need to show the notes, and the back end generates these system notes from the various events. But it seems like that's a result of an action. So if you were to add a comment, it would generate a system note as well. Maybe, like, I don't know if that's a condition one that we want, but I would see that as a bit separate than comments.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if I'm missing something because I didn't quite follow your point on that one.
If I had, I'll have to pull up the MVC of it. I can take that as a takeaway to kind of figure that out. Prep this issue better. This was pulled off when we were pulling things out of the initial MVC.
But if I'm understanding you, Lucas, you're questioning what the need for making comments are just to display system actions, what the dependency between the two is.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in both cases, a comment and a system event are basically metadata attached to a vulnerability, but I think that they work in different ways.
All right, so it sounds like Andy can work with Matt on whether we need to create a ticket around the ability to put comments into vulnerabilities, but this can still stay focused on showing the system notes, whatever they might be, right? If we had comments, eventually they would show there.
But the
Yeah.
logical break, I guess, that we could discuss is front end, back end, if we want to break that down more.
Let's talk about that because I'm kind of two minds about that. So if we were to create another issue off of this, I'm so used to a world where we have subtasks to define that. I don't know if that necessarily, I mean, that is one logical break. What do you guys think? Do you think it makes sense to have separate front-end issues, front and back-end issues for something that's of this size? Is that always helpful? Or does it create other problems around collaborating between the two areas? Or prioritize even? Does anyone have experience to draw from in cases where we've broken things down front-end and back-end and like they really want to vote for that, or do we just not typically do it?
I personally think that it's probably better if we break it up. This is one of those things where I think the backend needs to be in place before any front end work can be done.
So ensuring that the data is there to display before the front end.
Yeah, there wouldn't be anything that we could really get started on the front end until the back end's done because we need to.
Could we mock it up, Daniel, perhaps? So people could see how it would look. I mean, that might be overkill for this one or overdoing it for this one. I'm just thinking of if people can see it, then they can, even with mocked up data, then they can get a feel for how it may operate. But I can see reasons for not doing that too. But just a thought. What do you think?
Yeah, that we could do that. If I could maybe get an example of how the shape of the data would look like, even if it's not going to be finalized, that would help a lot so that it wouldn't be like we wouldn't have to code against a data that's going to be vastly different than what the final copy is going to be. But then, you know, as long as we get that, we can at least get started in parallel with the backend. So that's a good point. Thanks for bringing that up, Wayne.
Sure. It reminded me of the iteration interview that Christopher did with Sid. That it's a good idea, and we don't always have to do this, right? But just something we should consider is have the UI in place, even if it's junk data, so people can get a feel for it, and then build out the back end is not a bad way to go.
As long as we're not creating a situation where we can't release them independently, I'm totally in favor of it. You know, I'd hate to have some sort of a dependency between two issues where we create risk if one goes before the other, but I haven't seen that around here very much. So I don't know who this is a question actually for. So Lucas or Paul or
I think Andy's got a comment in Zoom chat.
developer want to volunteer or be able to answer. Is this something that we could answer today? Do we know the way this data looks already enough to be able to do this as part of grooming?
Right, see the comment in the Zoom chat from Andy.
Sorry, it hides when I've got these.
Oh yeah, so I posted what kind of the problem would be in that link in Zoom chat, but that's kind of, we can separate the two. So if you change the status, the vulnerability, you'll be able to see.
Fun.
So that's how we're coupling the statuses now. So the comments and system notes are interwoven.
Is this something that you'd see elsewhere within the GitLab UI?
No, we kind of hacked it together because we were going for parity. And this is how we had built this for a modal, the vulnerability info itself.
Security dashboard modal view of vulnerabilities today, you have the ability to comment specific on a status change?
On dismissal, yeah.
Dismissal. Okay, this is a good thing to call out because I know from a front end perspective, if we're not just reusing existing code, it increases the complexity quite a bit, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds to me like the main action coming out of the discussion for this issue is to create a front-end issue off of it that can be worked independently from the back-end issue. We've already got some mock-ups. I'm not clear on the answer then around the comments. Do we create a separate issue? I mean, there's a dependency here if this is what the requirement is to add the system notes, right, for parity?
The system notes will get us past parity. So if we want to consider how to plan in commenting, simple commenting ability, so we're not planning on markdown or quick actions right away. I wouldn't think we would. And knowing how other groups have tried to do commenting, seen it take a while. So maybe, yeah, just another issue for
status change information without the comments because we would not be at parity then is what you're saying, Andy?
Yes, if we implemented this and took away the ability to comment, we would lose parity.
Okay, so it sounds like since that's not reflected in the issue, that we need to update the details or the description of the issue to include that, or did I miss that in the? I hate this little thing up here.
We'll need another issue, and then we can just link the two.
Okay, Matt, can you take care of the creation of the commenting portion of that?
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
guess I'm a little worried. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask, is that, Andy, something that we would potentially want to do then the commenting on the issue or on the vulnerability first? and then come back to this so that we can leverage the commenting in place? Or is this a true kind of a third state? It's comment, it's a system note, or it's a comment, or sorry, a system note plus comment.
I think the natural progression would be probably to go commenting first and then rip out the way we have it today and then do system notes so that we have system notes and general commenting. I know just saying like, oh, let's put commenting in the vulnerabilities, that's going to be a chore. So doing that first might be appropriate, might be more appropriate than going system notes.
So there's a difference between like a general comment and a comment for a particular system note.
Yeah. So like what's being typed here is just like a general comment, and you'll see it as just like an open field with the avatar, and the user can just add a comment. The way we built our MVC is we wanted commenting, but we also wanted the identifier of event. So we put those together because we already had something built for it. So our solution was just reuse what we do in modal, but just on a page. Now it's more a question of continuity. So if we do commenting first, that we can kind of discuss that as a feature, like now you can comment and it doesn't have to be incumbent on a status being there or not. You can just type a comment in. And then we can add system notes later and refresh how we were doing comments initially.
Okay, so I think we've made some progress and highlighted some areas that maybe would have been overseen in grooming. I don't feel like this is ready to move on to scheduling and grooming. That being said, given some of the things that have come up. Matt, what do you think? Should we revisit this specific issue since it's at the top of your list once we've got some of these details a little bit more fleshed out? You're muted.
It was such good stuff I was saying too. No, based on the conversation here, it definitely sounds like this has got to be a follow-on, and we've got a missing issue for commentary that needs to go in front of it. And kind of in parallel, it sounds like, Andy, you and I need to kind of think about, do we want to go for the same kind of behavior, or do we want to make something maybe a little bit different? With, I guess, from input from engineering to see if this whole change state plus comments is going to make it more problematic.
I'm not sure that the backend would change regardless of this decision, though. So breaking out that work, maybe, I think that could be done anytime. That basically involves creating system notes internally when things change and then exposing it somewhere. If we're just talking about how that's going to integrate the comment system, that can happen. That's still pending. But if we break out that work, I think at least part of it can now be scheduled.
So even if we couldn't release the system notes without the ability to comment, we could build out the ability to see them and then iterate on that, adding the comment, the ability to comment and display of comments as sort of a second internal iteration.
Oh, yeah, and also if we're waiting on the backend, then when we launch, we are going to start recording system notes at that point. But if we were to do the backend earlier, then we would actually have some history of system notes present already.
Oh, that's a good point. All right, so I think that these bullet points still capture that. So if we break out a front end issue for this and some of these additional questions around the commenting and getting the data for that, that can be resolved in parallel to the backend work getting started, because this is pretty straightforward from a backend perspective. Okay, I'm seeing Lucas nodding his head. So for the sake of time, that was 23 minutes on one. Let's see if we can get to 2 today, and we'll move on to the second one here. Exportable security reports, MVC. I hope, so can someone, hey Matt, you wanna just give me a couple sentence summary of this one as the PM?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something that originally was started as a customer request. Effectively, our security dashboard it's a good start, but it has limited utility because it can only be accessible by people that are GitLab users. The idea here is to start by taking what would appear in the security dashboards, so the list of vulnerability detections, and making a simple CSV export of that data. In the use cases, people can use that for internal compliance needs. And the case of the customer that requested is they actually provide this kind of information to their clients for whom they are developing software to prove that they have run a certain number of scan types and that they lack critical or high vulnerabilities when things are released to production. So yeah, that's pretty much it. It's taking what we've got today, and the CSV is kind of the bare minimum export for a report format. And then I think there's a design tab on this one as well. Becca provided some good mock-ups for this. So very subtle, you'll see there just above the hide dismissed, we're adding a new icon to the screen. There's the little download icon, and oh, you don't have to close it. You can hit the, oh, there you go.
An arrow, okay.
Yeah, so then once you actually do hit the download, it's going to be a little modal confirmation, or no, sorry, this is the new feature indicator.
Oh, so this will take you out to a doc.
This is, yeah, so this is going to show people, hey, there's a new thing here. This is what it does. And then the third and the final one is when you do the on-hover. And so clicking it is actually just going to directly download the CSV file, just browser handled file download.
So is this exclusively front-end work?
No, I don't think we have the ability to generate the CSV file today.
Except it should be pulling the list, just the list of vulnerabilities.
So the data is already available. The UI needs to be built out, but then this download of the CSV, something that can be published in the front end. I mean, we've done PDF downloads in front end development before.
We also need to specify what data we're exporting and whether this works for a group or project or instance or all. Which currently the vulnerability dashboard times out on groups like GitLab org. So that could be a lot of data.
I didn't consider, Matt, have you, no, that's a good, so customers want this in a specific format. Do we know what they want to import it in? I mean, CSV is great for, just about anything, but is there a specific security standard out there that's REST-based or XML-based that customers might want to import it into? I know going, expand it, talking about maybe future things. Do they want it in a human readable format that looks good like a PDF? I've seen that from other similar security exports. So like CSV is definitely a great start. It's kind of universal, but have we considered those other things?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what we backed off to. What they had originally asked for was a PDF report with all these kind of, configuration settings or whatever. And ultimately we came down on CSV. Is the challenge, the root challenge is it is really difficult or impossible for them to get the data cleanly out of the GitLab system. So they don't have a really good way to do that.
Maybe do something else in addition later, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. This is just the first, we're trying to be as MVC-ish as possible in this one. So this is the bare minimum to get the data out in a structured format so that they can go off and format it, filter it, and do whatever they need to.
Yeah, should we have a header line in the first row explaining what each field is? I think we probably should, so people know what it is when they import it. If the field, unless it's brutally obvious, we should probably have a header field. It'd be great, actually, Matt, I guess, if you could put together an example. This is what, for this data, here's what the CSV would look like. And that would give us a target to build towards. Is that a reasonable ask?
Sure.
Okay.
Hey, Lucas, I missed your second concern. I think it was around security as well. Did Wayne capture it just now? I feel like I missed something.
So we talked about the content of the report, but we didn't talk about whether this was a feature of every security dashboard or just instance, group, project, etc. And given this is an MVC, if we want to choose one. which I think would naturally be the project, but
So these are questions going, so this isn't a question. These are items that I think need to be answered. Do you guys, these, I'm not necessarily saying that these need to be answered to not call this broken down for planning. I feel like some of these can be defined as we go into grooming, especially the data itself. I guess my outs are there, going back to our goal of this meeting and what we're trying to answer, are the requirements clear enough? Do we understand what the goal is of or the intent of this issue? Does anyone have any more questions on that? No? And we understand the work boundaries at this point. And breakdown. Is there a place that this could be broken down to a smaller chunk, or do we feel like this is a reasonably sized issue enough on its own that stands on its own 2 feet? I saw Lucas just did a
Beyond what Lucas said is, what's the scope of it in terms of what data it pulls, if I understood. It seems relatively straightforward. Sure, when we get into it, it might not be, but looking up it seemed earth-shattering.
We're just trying to make a goal of reducing the odds of that as much as possible, Wayne. So, Jonathan, Paul, any questions on this one or thoughts?
No, I got nothing.
Sorry, just calling you guys out to be quiet. All right, I'm gonna hit comments on this one. I do feel like at this point, based on the answers to the questions, that we can move this one to scheduling. If anyone protests at this point, you're welcome to.
Just to kind of field out, does group in project feel like a reasonable starting point? I think we can defer instance level for different solutions, given, Lucas, what you said about the performance impact.
yeah, and well, that's,
Or should we
And
keep
that-
this to project and make a separate one for group?
yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the most prudent. We get something out there and it's the same performance bottleneck we currently have. So we can work on that in the same context of solving that.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm gonna go with project on this one, and then we'll make a copy of this and address the group level roll up separately.
Can you reply to this comment with that, Matt?
Yes.
Or update the, I think, I would like to get into a world where we don't just make decisions and comments and issues, and when we come to a decision, whether it's a group or an individual, that they are reflected in the description of the issue to reduce in the amount of scrolling you have to do to get all of the requirements for an issue. So Matt, would you please, instead of commenting on the issue, update the description to reflect that?
Absolutely. Yeah, we definitely should be doing that. So if we're not called out.
All right, we are 2 minutes past, so we made it through 2. So that's great. It's better than none. I've, out of respect for time, we'll find other times to continue with this conversation. To some degree, we might have to limp along on our previous way of planning, which puts a lot more dependencies on the EMs and grooming. But going forward, I'd like to get ahead of these conversations so we're not, rushing to get through a big list of issues just prior to planning for a milestone, but this is sort of an ongoing thing, and as new issues get created, we're talking about less than a minute time. But that's going to take us a little bit, and I think that this has been really successful despite the fact that we just did 2 issues. So thank you all for your time. I will share the recording both in the agenda, and I will post both today's and yesterday's out on YouTube.
Awesome. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good afternoon, evening, morning, wherever the heck you are.
Bye.